If you think you know every version of Rick Sanchez this show could throw at you, you don't. Not the one where he's split down the middle, literally, arguing with his own headless body about which half of him is the real one. So here's the setup. Rick, Morty, and Summer are hanging out at what's basically an intergalactic all-you-can-eat buffet. Rick's in his element, eating, drinking, and completely ignoring the fact that his grandkids were promised an actual adventure today. Morty's annoyed. Summer's annoyed. Rick, predictably, does not care. He tells them, and I'm paraphrasing slightly because the actual quote is not safe for a script like this, that it's all you can eat and they should dig in. That's the whole plan. That's it. Now this matters because this season has quietly been doing something different with Rick. It's not been about some cosmic villain or a multiversal threat. Episode 2 had Rick literally create a version of himself named Ted, a guy who just wanted a boring, normal life with bowling nights and routine, and watched that experiment fall apart. This season keeps putting Rick face-to-face with pieces of his own personality instead of putting him face-to-face with bad guys. And Episode 6 takes that idea and makes it disturbingly literal, because mid-argument with Morty through an open portal, Rick messes up. He closes the portal at exactly the wrong moment, right as his head is on one side and his body's on the other. And instead of, dying, because this is Rick, and he's spent decades cybernetically upgrading every part of himself just in case something exactly like this happened, both halves keep functioning, independently. The head's stuck with Morty, the body's stuck with Summer, and now we've got two separate stories running at once, which, let's be honest, is a genius structural move for an episode, because it forces two characters who don't usually get one-on-one Rick time to deal with completely different versions of him. Morty's version is the brain, still arrogant, still sarcastic, still thinking 6 steps ahead of everyone in the room, but without a body attached, Rick's head can't just muscle his way through a problem anymore. He has to actually listen. And weirdly, he starts listening to Morty. They're being chased through an unfamiliar city by cops, hospital staff who very understandably want to figure out why there's a talking head, bounty hunters, and random alien criminals who smell an opportunity. And for the first time in a long time, Rick's thinking his way out of situations instead of shooting his way out. Morty spends most of this half of the episode trying to talk the head down from doing anything violent, and it mostly works. Not because Rick's had some instant change of heart, because he physically can't grab a gun anymore. Meanwhile, across the planet, Summer's dealing with the other half, Rick's body. No head, obviously no mouth, can't talk. So it communicates the only way it can, scribbled notes. And here's where it gets weirdly touching, because the body is protective. It fights off attackers coming after Summer without hesitation, no thinking required, and pure instinct. And at one point it writes her a note explaining, in Rick's own blunt way, that he usually finds it hard to say how he actually feels because he overthinks everything into the ground. Coming from a guy who can't currently overthink anything because he doesn't have a brain attached that lands harder than it has any right to. So think about what the show's doing here. Split Rick into 2 literal halves, and you get the logical, calculating Rick who bonds with Morty through reasoning. And you get the instinctive, protective Rick who bonds with Summer through action, because that's the only language he's got left. It's not subtle, it's not trying to be, but it works because it's basically confirming something the show's hinted at for years, that Rick relates to his grandkids in totally different ways, and neither of those ways is healthy adult communication. And just when you think this is heading towards some sweet, tidy little reunion, it doesn't. Both halves start convincing themselves they're better off apart. The head decides being purely rational, free of impulsive, body-driven decisions is an upgrade. The body decides that not overthinking every interaction, just acting on instinct and protecting the people around him, is actually working out pretty well. Which means when Morty and Summer finally manage to get the 2 halves in the same room, they're not walking into a reunion, they're walking into a breakup. And that's the part of this episode that actually stings, because it's not played as a joke. Rick's head looks at Rick's body. No face on it, remember, just a torso and a pad of paper, and says it doesn't need one. That the body just weighs him down, makes him impulsive, makes him reckless. And the body writes back. It doesn't defend itself with logic, because it can't win that argument. It just writes something short. Something about how being purely logical means never actually feeling anything, and what's the point of surviving 100 timelines if none of it means anything to you? That's the gut punch of the episode, and it's worth sitting with for a second, Because underneath the absurdity of a floating head arguing with a headless torso, this is genuinely Rick Sanchez confronting the two things he's spent decades trying to keep separate: the part of him that thinks its way out of every problem, and the part of him that actually cares about the people standing next to him. And for one long, quiet beat, it looks like he might just choose to stay split, choose to keep those two things apart forever, because it's easier that way, less painful that way. But, and this is where the show pulls back from actually breaking your heart, because it's still Rick and Morty. They talk. Privately, just the two halves. With no Morty or Summer listening in. We don't get every word of it. The show doesn't need us to. What we get is the outcome. They agree. Whole is better than half, even if whole means dealing with everything that comes with being one complete complicated person. And just like that, head and body reunite, and Rick's back to being one guy who can walk, talk, and shoot things simultaneously again. Now here's the part where a lesser episode would just end on that emotional beat and roll credits. Not this one. Because once Rick's whole again, he decides he needs to prove a point. So the gang ends up in a full-blown intergalactic swimming competition. They finish third. Rick's completely fine with that, which, if you know Rick, should tell you everything. Because losing has never sat well with this guy before. He tells Morty and Summer straight up that the whole point was proving success doesn't automatically make you happy. Then they walk right back into that same alien buffet from the cold open and start eating and drinking again like nothing happened. Which, on the surface, feels like the show resetting the board. Rick's back to being Rick, ignoring his grandkids in favor of unlimited alien buffet food. But that's kind of the joke and kind of the point. Rick and Morty has never been a show about characters who learn their lesson and stay changed forever. It's a show about characters who almost learn something, glimpse it clearly for one gut-wrenching conversation between a head and a body, and then go right back to being exactly who they were. Except now you, the viewer, know they saw it. They know it's in there. If you zoom out, this episode's really just the latest chapter in something Season 9's been building all year. Rick's biggest fights aren't with monsters or evil versions of himself from other dimensions anymore. They're with the parts of his own head, sometimes literally, that don't want to cooperate with each other. If episodes like this, the ones that use the sci-fi premise to actually say something about the character, are your favorite kind of Rick and Morty, stick around because I break these down every week they air. Which half of Rick do you relate to more, the logical head or the instinctive body?